A young millionaire flashed married a homeless girl to avoid an arranged marriage, unaware about the truth which would change his life. Ethan Reynolds had everything most people could only dream of: a sprawling penthouse overlooking the city skyline, the roar of expensive sports cars parked in his private garage, and a reputation as a shrewd businessman who had turned his family's modest empire into an international conglomerate. At 28, he was the face of success, an enigma who could buy anything, go anywhere, and charm anyone. Yet, in his heart, Ethan carried the weight of emptiness, a void money could never fill. The void turned into turmoil when his parents summoned him to their estate one rainy evening. The grandeur of the mansion was matched only by their unyielding expectations. His mother, elegant yet stern, placed a photograph of a girl on the table. "This is Anna St. Clair," she declared with a tone that brooked no argument. "Her family is well connected. The alliance will be perfect for the company." Ethan stared at the photo. Anna was beautiful, no doubt. But he had no intention of marrying someone for the sake of business. The very idea suffocated him. "Mother, I'm not a pawn in your corporate strategies," he said, his jaw tightening. "I'll choose my own life." His father, a towering figure with a booming voice, added his weight to the conversation. "You have a week, Ethan. Either you agree to this marriage, or we'll force your hand." That night, Ethan's mind raced. He had always known his parents were controlling, but this was a new level of coercion. He needed a plan, a way out. It was then that the absurd idea struck him. If he were already married, they couldn't force him into another union. The plan was reckless, audacious, and utterly insane, but it was the only way he could think of to reclaim his freedom. He just needed someone, anyone, willing to play along. The next day, Ethan wandered the streets of the city incognito, wearing a hoodie and jeans. He needed anonymity and someone far removed from his world of wealth and power. As he walked past a park, he noticed a young woman sitting under a tree, clutching a threadbare blanket against the chill. Her hair was disheveled, and her face bore the marks of hardship, but her eyes were captivating. They held a quiet strength, a defiance against the cruel world around her. "Excuse me," he said, crouching in front of her. She looked up, wary but curious. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice hoarse but steady. "I need your help," Ethan replied, his words tumbling out faster than he'd planned. "I'll pay you, whatever you need. I just need you to marry me. Right now." She blinked, as though he'd spoken in a foreign language. "What kind of joke is this?" "It's not a joke," he assured her, pulling a stack of cash from his pocket. "I just need a marriage certificate. No strings attached. You'll never have to see me again after today." The girl hesitated, her fingers curling around the edges of her blanket. "Why me?" "Because you're here," Ethan said honestly. "And I need someone who has nothing to lose." She studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Fine. But I have one condition." "What's that?" "I want a hot meal first," she said, her lips twitching into the ghost of a smile. "If I'm going to marry a stranger, I don't want to do it on an empty stomach." Ethan chuckled, the first genuine laugh he'd had in days. "Deal." An hour later, they stood before a justice of the peace in a dimly lit office. The girl, she had introduced herself as Lily, wore a second-hand dress Ethan had hastily bought for her, and he had never felt more absurd in his life. Yet, as they exchanged vows, something about her calm demeanor steadied his nerves. The moment the officiant declared them husband and wife, Lily looked at him with a mixture of amusement and resignation. "Well, Mr. Millionaire, what happens now?" "You go your way, and I go mine," Ethan said, handing her another envelope of cash. "Thank you, Lily. I owe you." Lily stared at the envelope but didn't take it. "Keep it," she said quietly. "I didn't do this for the money." Ethan was taken aback. "Then why?" "Because you looked like someone who needed saving," she replied simply before walking out the door. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan threw himself back into work, relieved to have avoided the arranged marriage. But Lily's parting words lingered in his mind. He couldn't understand why someone who had so little would refuse a fortune. Against his better judgment, he began to look for her, hiring a private investigator to track her down. When he found her again, she was volunteering at a soup kitchen, her face lit with joy as she served meals to others in need. She was no longer the broken girl he had met in the park. She was radiant, alive. "What are you doing here?" she asked when she saw him. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. I couldn't stop thinking about you." Lily's expression softened, but she remained guarded. "I'm just a homeless girl you married to avoid your problems. Why do you care?" Ethan hesitated. "Because I think there's more to you than meets the eye. And I want to know your story." Lily sighed, looking out the window. "It's not a pretty story, Ethan. But if you're sure you want to hear it." "I'm sure," he said, his voice steady. What she revealed left him speechless. Lily had once been the daughter of a wealthy family herself, but tragedy had struck, leaving her orphaned and penniless. Her relatives had squandered her inheritance, and she had been left to fend for herself on the streets. Yet, through it all, she had never lost her sense of purpose or her compassion for others. As Ethan listened, he felt something shift within him. Lily's resilience and kindness stirred a part of him he had long buried. For the first time in years, he began to see beyond the confines of his privileged world. Their story had only just begun, and Ethan had no idea how much more it would change him, or what secrets Lily still held close to her heart. But one thing was certain: he was no longer running away from his life. He was running toward something new, something extraordinary. And it all started with a reckless decision to marry a stranger. Ethan couldn't shake the profound impact Lily's story had on him. Her journey from privilege to poverty was a tale of resilience, but it wasn't just her past that fascinated him. It was her strength, her defiance against a cruel fate, and the way she still cared for others despite having so little. For days after their conversation at the soup kitchen, Ethan found himself distracted, her words echoing in his mind. One evening, as he sat in his penthouse, staring out at the city lights, Ethan made a decision that surprised even himself. He needed to know more. Not just about Lily's past, but about who she was now. There was something about her that stirred emotions he hadn't felt in years: curiosity, admiration, and an unshakable pull toward her. The next day, he showed up at the soup kitchen again. Lily raised an eyebrow when she saw him. "You're persistent," she said, handing a plate of food to a man in line. Ethan smiled sheepishly. "I guess I am." She nodded toward a pile of clean aprons. "If you're going to hang around, you might as well help." Before he could protest, she tossed him an apron. Ethan hesitated but eventually put it on, feeling out of place yet oddly satisfied as he started serving food alongside her. The work was humbling, and as the hours passed, he began to see the world through her eyes, one filled with hardship but also with unexpected moments of connection and kindness. When the last meal was served, Lily turned to him, wiping her hands on her apron. "So, what's the real reason you're here? You don't strike me as the volunteer type." Ethan leaned against the counter, his expression serious. "I don't know, Lily. Maybe I'm just trying to figure out why you've stuck with me since that day in the park." "You stuck with me," she pointed out. "And you didn't have to." "Maybe I did," he replied quietly. "There's something about you I can't ignore." For the first time, Lily seemed caught off guard. Her usual guardedness faltered, and she looked away, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her apron. "Ethan, I appreciate what you've done, but I'm not some puzzle you need to solve. My life is complicated. Maybe I want to help," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "If you'll let me." She hesitated, her walls beginning to crack. "You can't fix everything, Ethan. Sometimes people just have to figure things out on their own." "Maybe," he admitted. "But you don't have to do it alone." Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Lily began to spend more time together. He would pick her up after her shifts at the soup kitchen and take her to small, unassuming diners where they'd talk for hours. She shared more about her life, how she had once dreamed of becoming an artist, how she had lost everything but refused to let bitterness consume her. Ethan found himself opening up in return, sharing stories about his own struggles with the pressure of his family's expectations and the emptiness he had felt despite his wealth. Their bond grew stronger, but it wasn't without its challenges. Lily was fiercely independent and often pushed back against Ethan's attempts to help her financially. "I don't need your money," she insisted one evening as he offered to buy her new clothes. "I've survived this long without it." "It's not about the money," he said. "It's about making your life a little easier." "Why won't you let me do that?" "Because I don't want to owe anyone," she replied, her voice firm. "Not even you." Ethan respected her resolve, but it also frustrated him. He had never met someone so determined to stand on their own, even when they were struggling. But he also admired her for it. As their relationship deepened, Ethan began to see Lily in a new light, not as a homeless girl or a symbol of resilience, but as someone he genuinely cared about. And for the first time, he began to question what their marriage really meant. One night, as they walked through the park where they had first met, Ethan stopped and turned to her. "Lily, have you ever thought about what's next? For you, I mean." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I try not to think too far ahead. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. What if I told you I want to be part of whatever's next for you?" he said, his voice low. Lily's eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked vulnerable. "Ethan, you don't have to do this. We made a deal, remember? A marriage on paper. No strings attached." "I know," he said. "But that deal doesn't feel right anymore. Not to me." She looked away, her shoulders tense. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "Lily, I've never felt this way about anyone before. I know we started this whole thing as strangers, but I don't want it to end that way." Lily was silent for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "There's something you don't know, Ethan. Something I haven't told you." He frowned, his heart sinking. "What is it?" She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. "When I said I didn't want your money, it's because I already have money. A lot of it." Ethan stared at her, confused. "What are you talking about?" "My inheritance," she said, her voice shaking. "It's still there. I've just been hiding from it. From the people who want to take it from me." The revelation hit Ethan like a tidal wave. Suddenly, everything about Lily's guardedness, her refusal to accept help, made sense. She wasn't just a homeless girl trying to survive. She was someone running from a past that threatened to consume her. But what Ethan didn't realize was that this secret was only the beginning. Lily's past was more tangled than he could have imagined, and the truth would soon test their growing bond in ways neither of them were prepared for. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to process Lily's revelation. "So, you're saying you have an inheritance? One you've been avoiding all this time?" Lily nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "After my parents died, their estate became a battleground. Relatives I barely knew started circling like vultures. They contested the will, tried to manipulate me, and when I resisted, they made my life unbearable. I left everything behind, thinking I could start fresh. But the weight of it never went away." Ethan reached for her hand, his grip firm yet gentle. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" "Because I didn't want you to see me differently," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to be just another heiress with a sob story. And I didn't want you to feel like I was using you." "You didn't use me, Lily," Ethan said firmly. "If anything, I think I've been using you. You've reminded me what it means to live with purpose, to see beyond the walls of my own world." She looked up at him, her guarded expression softening. "You really mean that?" "I do," he said. "And I want to help you face this. You don't have to run anymore." Lily hesitated, her instincts urging her to retreat. But as she looked into Ethan's eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time: unwavering trust. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll face it. But only if you're by my side." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. With Ethan's support, Lily reconnected with lawyers and financial advisors, carefully untangling the web of deceit her relatives had woven. It wasn't easy. There were threats, accusations, and moments where she wanted to give up. But Ethan's presence steadied her, his unwavering belief in her giving her the strength to keep going. As they worked through the chaos, their bond deepened. Ethan realized that his feelings for Lily were no longer about admiration or obligation. They had grown into love. And Lily, despite her fears, found herself opening up to the idea of a future with him. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of legal meetings, Ethan took Lily to a quiet spot overlooking the city. The stars were scattered across the sky, their light shimmering like hope on the horizon. "I have something to say," Ethan began, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "When I married you, it was a selfish act. I wanted to escape an arranged marriage, and I didn't think beyond that moment. But meeting you, getting to know you, has been the best thing that's ever happened to me." Lily's breath hitched as he continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "You've taught me to see the world differently, to see myself differently. And I can't imagine my life without you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a simple yet elegant diamond ring. "This time, I want to do it the right way. Lily, will you marry me? Not for convenience, but because I love you." Tears streamed down Lily's face as she nodded, a smile breaking through her trembling lips. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. Their journey wasn't without challenges, but together, they faced them head-on. Lily reclaimed her inheritance, not as a symbol of wealth but as a tool to help others. She and Ethan established a foundation to support the homeless, giving people the second chances they both believed in. As they stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for their first shelter, Ethan turned to Lily, his hand entwined with hers. "Do you regret it? That day in the park?" She laughed softly, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Not for a second. That reckless marriage to a stranger turned out to be the best decision I ever made." Ethan smiled, pulling her close. "Me too." Under the applause of the crowd, they kissed, their love a testament to the beauty of unexpected beginnings and the power of facing life's truths together. Their story had started as a desperate escape, but it had blossomed into something extraordinary. A love that changed not only their lives but the lives of countless others.